I should have known something was wrong the moment my husband started caring about colors. Not the paint swatches he used to argue over when we remodeled the kitchen, not the car he drove or the shirts he wore to work. No, it was the way he suddenly coordinated his gym outfits. Matching compression shirts with sneakers, protein shakers that matched his duffel bag, workout selfies taken at angles he had never used before. After 19 years of marriage, you learn the difference between self-improvement and performance. My name is Elena Maddox. I'm 42 years old, a mother, a wife, or at least I was, and I sell construction equipment for a living. Bulldozers, excavators, machines designed to tear things down so something else can be built in their place. Ironic, considering my marriage was quietly collapsing while I was still pretending everything was solid. "Mom, you're overthinking it," my daughter Sarah told me one Tuesday night. She was 17, sharp-tongued, observant, with her father's skeptical eyes, and my dark hair pulled into a careless knot. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "Dad's just trying to stay healthy." "At 9 o'clock at night?" I asked, standing by the front window, watching Mark's car pull out of the driveway for the third time that week. Sarah shrugged. Maybe he really likes the gym. But I had been married to Mark for 19 years. I knew the rhythm of his habits. I knew his tells, and I absolutely knew the difference between a husband coming home from a workout and a husband coming home from somewhere else entirely. He used to come back sweaty, tired, hungry. Now he came back energized, smiling, distracted. His phone never left his hand, and when he kissed me, it felt like a gesture he'd practiced in advance. I didn't know yet who she was. I didn't know yet that there was more than one woman involved. All I knew was this. Something had shifted beneath my feet, and I was standing on a fault line, smiling, nodding, playing the role of the trusting wife, while the ground was already cracking open. And the worst part? Everyone around me thought I was paranoid. I would soon learn that paranoia is just intuition people dismiss when the truth is inconvenient. Before everything fractured, my life looked reasonable. Not glamorous, not chaotic, just steady. I was 23 when I met Mark Maddox. I had just started my career in construction equipment sales, an industry where being a woman meant you had to speak louder, know more, and apologize less. Mark worked in logistics then. He was calm where I was intense, methodical where I was instinctive. We met at a company mixer neither of us wanted to attend. He stood by the drinks table, hands in his pockets, watching everyone else talk. I liked that about him. He didn't need to be the loudest man in the room to feel important. He asked me what I did, I told him. He didn't joke about heavy machinery or make it weird. That alone felt like respect. We married 3 years later. 19 years is a long time to build a life with someone. Long enough to forget who you were before them. Long enough to confuse routine with safety. We bought a house outside Seattle. Suburban, quiet, predictable. We raised Sarah together. Soccer practices, late-night homework, hospital scares, birthdays, arguments, reconciliations. From the outside, we were solid. And for a long time we were. Mark wasn't flashy, but he was dependable. The kind of man who remembered to lock the doors, who paid bills on time, who showed up when things mattered. But somewhere along the way, we stopped talking about ourselves. Conversations became logistical. "Did you pay the water bill?" "Sarah needs a ride tomorrow. I'll be late tonight." We still slept in the same bed, still shared meals, still attended school events together, but intimacy faded so quietly I didn't realize it was gone until I started missing something I couldn't name. And then came the gym. At first it felt harmless. "Doctor says I need to take my health more seriously," Mark told me one evening, tightening his running shoes. "I think that's great," I said, and I meant it. I encouraged him, packed his gym bag, bought him better sneakers when his knees started bothering him. That's the part people never talk about. Infidelity doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with support. He joined Fitness First, a local gym known for personal training programs. He talked about his trainer like you'd talk about a mechanic or a dentist. Professional, helpful, necessary. "Her name's Brenda Cole," he said once, scrolling through his phone. "She's really good at what she does." I didn't ask to see her photo. Why would I? I trusted my husband. The changes were gradual. He started shaving more carefully, wearing cologne again, standing a little straighter. And when I asked how his sessions were, his answers became vague. Good. Hard. You wouldn't like it. I told myself I was being ridiculous. 19 years doesn't disappear because of gym clothes. His family didn't notice anything unusual. My friends didn't either. And Sarah was too busy being 17 to pay attention to the emotional weather of her parents' marriage. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. But at the time, they felt like static, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. I didn't know that while I was focusing on keeping our life stable, someone else was teaching my husband how to perform desire. And I didn't yet understand that this wasn't just about another woman. It was about who Mark became when he wasn't with me. The first time I felt it, truly felt it, wasn't when Mark stayed out late. It was when he came home and looked past me like I was furniture. I was standing at the kitchen counter chopping onions, eyes watering, hands busy, trying to make something warm out of a Tuesday. Mark walked in, gym bag over his shoulder, hair damp like he'd just showered. "Hey," I said. He kissed my cheek, quick, light, almost polite, and headed straight for the fridge. No story, no complaint, no, you won't believe what happened. He used to tell me everything, even the boring things. Now, silence followed him like a shadow. "You okay?" I asked, watching him drink water as if he'd crossed a desert. "Fine." His eyes stayed on the countertop, not on me. "Just tired." It was the way he said it, like the conversation was an inconvenience. And then he started protecting his phone. Not obviously, not dramatically, just instinctively. If a message pinged while he was near me, he'd angle the screen away. If I walked into the room, he'd lock it without thinking. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because his body had learned a new reflex. That reflex is what haunts you. Because it means the secrecy isn't accidental anymore, it's rehearsed. Sarah noticed my mood before I noticed it myself. "Mom," she said one evening, pulling a blanket over her legs on the couch, "you've been weird lately." "Weird how?" "Like why is it you're listening even when no one's talking?" She raised an eyebrow. "Did something happen at work?" I wanted to laugh. Work was the only place where things still made sense. Machines didn't lie. Contracts didn't pretend. Steel didn't smile at you and disappear behind your back. "It's nothing," I said. But Sarah didn't let it go. She was Mark's daughter, but she had my stubbornness. "It's Dad, isn't it?" I hesitated, too long. Sarah's eyes sharpened. "He's just going to the gym, Mom." "At night," I said quietly. "On weekdays, sometimes twice." Sarah rolled her eyes, but her voice softened. "Maybe he's just trying to feel better about himself." There it was. The story everyone wanted to believe. Midlife, health, motivation, self-improvement. And maybe that was part of it. Maybe it was even the beginning. But my instinct kept returning to the same uncomfortable truth. People don't become strangers overnight. They become strangers by building a second life, brick by brick. It got worse when his routine started affecting ours. He stopped coming to Sarah's school events because he had training. He stopped eating dinner with us because he'd already had a protein meal. He stopped sitting beside me on the couch because he needed to stretch. Even his laughter changed. It became lighter, sharper, like someone had taught him how to be charming again. One night, I did something I never thought I would do. I waited. I pretended to sleep. Mark slid out of bed around 8:45 p.m. Careful, practiced, like he'd done it before. I kept my breathing slow, my body still, while my heart started pounding hard enough to make my ribs ache. The front door clicked softly. And for the first time in 19 years, I lay in my own bed and wondered, where is my husband going when he thinks I'm not looking? When he came back, it was after 11. He showered immediately. He always showered immediately now. And when he slipped into bed beside me, he didn't reach for me. He didn't even sigh in that familiar way that used to mean, "Thank God I'm home." He lay down like a man returning to a place he no longer belonged. The next morning, when I went to grab laundry from his gym bag, I found something that made my stomach turn. A towel, still damp, sealed inside a plastic bag. And on one corner, faint but undeniable, was a smear of lipstick. Not my shade. Not any shade I'd ever seen in our bathroom. I stood there holding that towel like it was evidence from a crime scene, my fingers cold, my throat tight, my mind trying desperately to find an innocent explanation. But another voice inside me whispered, "No one hides a towel unless they're hiding what it means." The moment everything stopped being a suspicion and became a fact happened on a Thursday. I remember it because Thursdays were supposed to be boring. Predictable, safe. I had taken the morning off to meet a long-term client and finished earlier than expected. It was one of those rare Seattle afternoons when the rain wasn't aggressive, just a gray drizzle that soaked into your clothes without asking permission. On impulse, I decided to surprise Mark with lunch. That alone should tell you how far gone I still was. His office was 15 minutes from our house. I parked across the street, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed my hair, and dialed his cell. Straight to voicemail. That was unusual. Mark always answered during lunch hours. Always. I tried again. Voicemail. A small knot formed in my stomach. I told myself not to overreact and called the office line. Northline Logistics, this is Jennifer. Hey, Jen, it's Elena Maddox. Is Mark around? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Oh, Mark called in sick today. The words landed like ice water down my spine. Sick? I repeated, forcing a laugh. He didn't mention that. Yeah, he said he wasn't feeling well this morning. Right, I said, my voice steady despite the way my heart started hammering. Thanks. I hung up and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, rain tapping softly against the windshield. Mark hadn't said a word about being sick. Not a text, not a note, not even a lie. For 10 full minutes, I did nothing. I could still turn around, still pretend I hadn't called, still let this remain a question mark instead of an answer. Instead, I started the engine. I drove to Fitness First. The parking lot was half full, midday crowd. Retirees, freelancers, people with flexible schedules. And then I saw it. A sleek black Audi parked near the entrance, custom rims, personalized license plate. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen it once before, parked outside our house 2 weeks earlier when Mark told me his trainer was organizing a group conditioning session. The trainer, Brenda Cole, early 40s, athletic, carefully styled blonde hair, and that aggressive kind of confidence people mistake for discipline. She had shaken my hand too firmly and smiled like she already knew something about me. Now her car sat there, engine still warm. My pulse roared in my ears as I walked toward the building. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and rubber mats. Music thumped faintly in the background. I scanned the room. Treadmills, weights, mirrors. And then I saw him. Mark stood near the back hallway, the one that led to the private training rooms. He wasn't lifting weights. He wasn't stretching. He was laughing. His body language was wrong, relaxed, open, tilted toward someone else. Toward her. Brenda's hand rested lightly on his arm. Not professionally, not briefly. Intimately. And then she leaned in and kissed him. Not a peck, not a mistake. A kiss that lingered long enough to mean something. My vision tunneled. It felt like my chest had collapsed inward, like all the air had been sucked out of the room and I'd forgotten how to breathe. I don't remember stepping backward. I don't remember leaving the building. I only remember sitting in my car, hands shaking so badly I couldn't put the key in the ignition. 19 years. 19 years of loyalty, routine, compromise, patience. And there he was, my husband, kissing another woman in the middle of a weekday afternoon while I was trying to surprise him with lunch. I didn't cry. That's what shocked me most. There was no screaming, no sobbing, no dramatic breakdown. Just a cold, precise clarity settling into place. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a phase. This was a choice. I drove home in silence, my thoughts moving faster than my emotions could keep up with. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. If I confronted him now, he would lie. And if he lied, I would never forgive myself for believing him again. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I said nothing. I smiled that evening. I asked about his sick day. I kissed him goodnight. And while he slept beside me, unaware that I had seen everything, I decided I wasn't going to explode. I was going to learn the truth first. All of it. Shock doesn't look the way movies teach you. There was no screaming, no throwing objects, no dramatic confrontation in the kitchen. There was just stillness. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, Mark's breathing slow and even beside me, my body rigid as if any movement might shatter whatever fragile control I had left. My mind kept replaying the same image on a loop. His smile, her hand, the kiss. Each time it replayed, something inside me detached a little more. I didn't ask why at first. I asked how long. Because affairs don't begin at the moment you catch them. They begin in 1,000 small decisions made long before the betrayal becomes visible. In the morning, I moved through the house like a guest. I made coffee, I packed Sarah's lunch, I answered emails, and I watched my husband lie to my face. Feeling better? I asked casually as he buttoned his shirt. Yeah, he said easily. Must have been a 24-hour thing. The ease of it almost broke me. He kissed my forehead, grabbed his gym bag, and left. I waited exactly 3 minutes before I locked the door and sat down at the kitchen table. That was the moment the questions finally came. What had I missed? When had I stopped being enough? Had I been naive or simply loyal in a world that no longer values it? I blame myself first. That's what women are trained to do. Maybe I'd focused too much on work. Maybe I'd stopped flirting. Maybe I'd grown too comfortable. Then another thought cut through the guilt like a blade. None of that justifies betrayal. By noon, the grief had hardened into something sharper. I called the one person I trusted to tell me the truth, even when it hurt. David Reynolds. My best friend since college. 20 years in law enforcement before retiring into private security. He answered on the second ring. Elena, you okay? No, I said. I think my husband is having an affair. Silence. Then, think or no? I saw him kiss his trainer. Another pause, longer this time. Do you want proof? He asked carefully. Or do you want closure? I want the truth, I said. All of it. He exhaled slowly. Are you sure you're ready for that? I slept next to him last night knowing he'd been with another woman, I said. I'm already past ready. David didn't argue. Give me 2 days. The waiting was torture. I smiled at Mark. I nodded at his excuses. I played my role so convincingly I almost forgot I was acting. Sarah noticed. You're being extra nice, she said one evening, studying me over her dinner plate. I forced a smile. Is that a crime? She didn't smile back. The nights were the worst. Lying next to him, feeling the warmth of his body, knowing exactly where it had been, and choosing silence anyway. Because silence, I learned, is sometimes not weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. 2 days later, David came over while Mark was at the gym. He spread the contents of a thick envelope across my kitchen table. Photos. Mark and Brenda Cole entering a cheap motel off Highway 405. Timestamps, receipts, multiple days, multiple visits. Each image felt like a small, controlled explosion in my chest. But David hadn't stopped there. She's not new to this, he said quietly. Divorced twice. History of sleeping with clients. Fired from her last gym for inappropriate conduct. I stared at one photo in particular. Mark laughing. He looked happy. That hurt more than the betrayal. What are you going to do? David asked. I gathered the photos into a neat stack. I'm not confronting him, I said. Not yet. David's brow furrowed. Elena, if I confront him now, he'll deny, minimize, rewrite history, I said. And I refuse to let him control the narrative. So what's your plan? I looked up at him. I'm going to make sure the truth speaks louder than I ever could. David studied my face for a long moment. You've changed, he said finally. No, I replied softly. I have just stopped protecting someone who didn't protect me. That night, Mark came home late. He slipped into bed beside me, unaware that every lie he'd told was now documented, time-stamped, and waiting. I closed my eyes and made a promise to myself. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not unravel. If this marriage was going to end, it would end on my terms. Once you decide not to confront the lie, but to outgrow it, everything changes. I became observant in a way I had never needed to be before. Mark didn't notice at first. He was too busy managing his double life to realize I was quietly stepping out of the role he'd assigned me. The trusting wife, the emotional safety net, the woman who would absorb discomfort so he wouldn't have to. I let him believe I was still there. I laughed at the right moments. I asked about his workouts. I even complimented his discipline. Inside, something was hardening. David helped me bring in a private investigator. Lou, former federal, 60 years old, eyes like weathered stone. He didn't waste time on sympathy. Your husband's careful, he said, flipping through notes at my dining table, but not clever. Tell me. Cash payments, burner phone, no digital trail he didn't think about. He paused. Except people. People always talk. Within a week, Lou had names. Rachel, Vicky, Amanda. Women I'd shared dinners with, holidays, laughter. Women who had smiled at me while helping my husband lie. They'd provided alibis, covered for late nights, confirmed fake work obligations, and they'd talked about it, comfortably, during their little book club meetings. The betrayal deepened, spreading outward like a stain. Mark wasn't just cheating on me. He was supported in doing it. What surprised me wasn't the rage. It was the clarity. This wasn't just about sex or attraction. It was about permission. Permission to disrespect me. Permission to rewrite our marriage as something disposable. I kept playing my part. When Mark mentioned Rachel casually one evening, I tilted my head. Oh, I spoke to her today. His fork paused midair. You did? Yes, she seemed distracted. A flicker of panic crossed his face before he masked it. She's always stressed. Is she? I asked lightly. She mentioned seeing you at the gym. Probably just in passing, he said too quickly. That night, he made several phone calls after going upstairs. I listened to everyone. The panic spread exactly the way Lou said it would. Rachel called Amanda. Amanda called Vicky. Vicky warned Mark. And Mark, my husband of 19 years, stood in our bedroom whispering reassurances to another woman while I folded laundry downstairs. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Authority. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was directing. The next step was pressure. Not emotional, structural. I learned about Brenda's business problems, about the gym partnership, about money missing where it shouldn't be. And I learned one crucial thing. People who cheat rarely protect everything equally. They always leave something exposed. I arranged a lunch with her business partner under the guise of investment interest. I didn't mention Mark. I didn't mention the affair. I mentioned numbers. Debt, risk, reputation. His eyes lit up with relief. By the end of the meal, he knew two things. His partner was a liability. I was not a woman to underestimate. Meanwhile, the online world did what it always does when given a nudge. Screenshots, questions, comments that started as jokes and turned into concerns. Nothing explicit, just enough. Clients noticed, reviews appeared, trust eroded. Mark felt it before he understood it. He came home tense, irritated, snapping at Sarah for small things. "You're on edge," I said one evening, setting his plate down carefully. "So are you," he shot back. I met his eyes calmly. "Am I?" He looked away. That night he didn't touch me. The distance between us wasn't cold anymore. It was charged. A few days later, his phone rang while he was in the shower. I didn't answer it. I didn't need to. The name on the screen was enough. He came downstairs afterward, pale, distracted. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Work stuff," he muttered. But his world was shrinking. Friends stopped responding. The gym stopped calling. And the woman he'd risked everything for was suddenly unavailable. I watched him unravel with a strange mix of grief and detachment. This was the man I had loved. And this was the man I was leaving behind. Sarah confronted me one night. "You know, don't you?" I didn't lie to her. "Yes. Are you going to leave?" I thought about that. About 19 years. About the house. About the version of myself I'd been trying to preserve. "I'm going to stop pretending," I said. She nodded slowly. "Good." That was when I understood something essential. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ending the lie cleanly, so it couldn't follow me into whatever came next. And Mark? He was about to learn what happens when the story you control is no longer yours to tell. The lowest point doesn't arrive with drama. It arrives quietly, when the noise fades and you're left alone with the truth you can no longer soften. Mark stopped pretending. Not openly, not honestly. But the small courtesies vanished. No more good morning, no more checking in, no more attempts to look like a husband. He moved through the house like a man already gone, his body present, his attention elsewhere. Nowhere, maybe, because the place he'd been escaping to was collapsing. One night, he didn't come home at all. No call, no text. Sarah stayed up with me, pretending to study while watching my face. "It's late," she said eventually. "I know. He might just be—" "Don't," I said gently. "Don't finish that sentence." She closed her book. At 2:14 a.m., I realized something that hollowed me out completely. I wasn't waiting for him because I loved him. I was waiting because I didn't yet know who I was without him. That realization hurt more than the affair. When he came home the next morning, his eyes were bloodshot, his movements erratic. "Where were you?" I asked, not accusing, just tired. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw the truth. He didn't even care enough to lie well anymore. "Out," he said. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not visibly. It was like a support beam giving way. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed we had shared for nearly 2 decades. The photos on the dresser stared back at me. Our wedding day. Sarah as a baby. A vacation where Mark had his arm around me like he was proud to belong to me. I pressed my palm against my chest and felt my heart beating too fast, too hard. For the first time since I'd discovered everything, I cried. Not for Mark. For myself. For the woman who had believed stability was safety. For the years I'd spent shrinking my needs so the marriage wouldn't feel threatened. For the way I'd mistaken endurance for love. That afternoon, Mark finally said the words I think he'd been rehearsing for weeks. "I don't know if this is working anymore." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was obscene. "You cheated," I said quietly, "and this is your conclusion?" He rubbed his face. "It's complicated." No, I said, it's cowardly. He didn't argue. That hurt more than if he had. That night I slept on the couch. Not in protest. In surrender. The house felt unfamiliar. Too large. Too quiet. Every sound echoed. Every memory felt sharpened, like it was trying to cut me open one last time. Around 3 a.m., I found myself standing in the kitchen, holding that towel again, the one with the lipstick stain. I don't know why I'd kept it. Proof, maybe, or punishment. I dropped it into the trash and watched it disappear beneath coffee grounds and old receipts. That was the moment I felt truly alone. Mark was still in the house. Sarah was asleep upstairs. But emotionally, I was on my own. The next day, I went to work and sat in my car for 10 minutes before going inside. I couldn't do this forever. I couldn't live suspended between who I had been and who I hadn't yet become. I called David. I don't know if I can finish this, I said. You don't have to finish anything, he replied calmly. You just have to survive the part you're in. But it hurts, I whispered. I know. There was a long silence. Then he said, Elena, when people show you who they are, believing them hurts once. Staying hurts forever. That night, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and looked at Mark sleeping alone. And for the first time, the thought didn't terrify me. Leaving wasn't the end. Staying would have been. The turning point didn't arrive with vengeance. It arrived with clarity. The morning after I realized staying would destroy me, David called. I need you to come by, he said. There's something you should hear in person. I drove to his office downtown, my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in weeks. That alone told me something inside had already shifted. David didn't offer coffee. He didn't sit. He pressed play. A recording filled the room. Voices overlapping, laughter too loud, the familiar cadence of women who felt safe enough to be careless. Rachel, Vicky, Amanda. They talked about schedules, excuses. Who would say what if someone asked questions? And then, Mark's name, said casually, dismissively. He's clueless, Rachel laughed. Elena won't suspect anything. She never does. The words landed harder than any photograph, because betrayal from a stranger hurts. But betrayal from people who sat at your table, ate your food, hugged you goodbye, that rewrites your understanding of trust entirely. David stopped the recording. They knew, he said simply. They all did. I closed my eyes. This wasn't about Mark anymore. This was about the world that had quietly agreed I didn't matter. There's more, David said. He slid a second folder toward me. Business records, financial discrepancies, evidence of Brenda's misconduct with clients, documented, undeniable. And one final thing. She's been bragging, David said. Not just to friends, at the gym, online. She thinks this ends with him leaving you. A strange calm settled over me. She thinks she won, I said. Yes, I nodded once. Okay. That word felt heavier than it should have, and freer than anything I'd said in years. That afternoon, I went home and asked Mark to sit down. He looked wary, defensive, exhausted. What is it? He asked. I know everything, I said. He opened his mouth. Don't, I added quietly. This isn't a conversation where you explain. This is a conversation where you listen. I told him about the recordings, the alibis, the business fallout already in motion. I told him that the woman he'd sacrificed his family for was not discreet, not loyal, and not waiting for him the way he imagined. His face drained of color. You set me up, he said weakly. No, I replied. You exposed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. He reached for my hand. I stood. I'm filing for divorce, I said calmly, for infidelity. You can't just... I can, I interrupted, and I am. Silence stretched between us. What about Sarah? He asked finally. She knows the truth, I said. Age-appropriate, honest, enough. He swallowed hard. She'll hate me. That depends on what you do next, I said. Not on what I do. That night, after he went upstairs, I sat alone in the living room and felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not relief. Ownership. Of my story, of my time, of the version of myself I would no longer negotiate away. The next steps unfolded quickly. Legal filings, quiet confirmations, the slow dismantling of a life built on omission. When Mark left for the gym the following morning, I watched him from the window. Not with longing, not with rage, but with a calm I didn't recognize. He wasn't leaving me anymore. I had already left him. And for the first time since all of this began, I understood the truth that changes everything. Power doesn't come from destroying someone else. It comes from refusing to disappear to keep them comfortable. Consequences don't arrive all at once. They ripple. And when they do, they don't need shouting to be devastating. Once the divorce papers were filed, the tone of the house changed immediately. Mark stopped posturing, stopped pretending he had control over anything. He moved into the guest room without being asked, packing his belongings in stiff, angry silence. He didn't apologize. Not really. He offered explanations, half-formed, defensive, self-serving. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just confused. You were always so strong. I didn't think... I cut him off every time. I'm not interested in your intentions, I said. Only your choices. Outside our walls, his world began collapsing with remarkable efficiency. The gym cut ties with Brenda within days. Clients canceled. Reviews flooded in. Some cautious, some brutal, all fatal to her reputation. The business partner moved fast, citing misconduct clauses and financial irregularities. Mark tried to reach her. She didn't answer. Not once. I watched him pace the living room one evening, phone clenched in his hand, jaw tight with frustration. She won't respond, he muttered. I didn't look up from the table where I was organizing paperwork. She already has, I said. You're just not listening. The friend group disintegrated next. Rachel called me first. Elena, please, can we talk? No. We were just trying to help. You helped yourself, I said calmly. You don't get access to me anymore. Vicky texted. Amanda emailed. I blocked them all. They confessed to their partners within 48 hours, not out of integrity, but fear. 2 marriages fractured. 1 ended outright. Their anger didn't turn inward. It turned toward Mark. He'd been the common denominator. At work, his performance slipped. He missed deadlines, snapped at colleagues. His supervisor called me, not to ask questions, but to inform me gently that they were monitoring the situation. Mark noticed Sarah pulling away next. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She withdrew. Short answers, polite distance, a quiet grief that settled between them like fog. One night, she came into my room and sat on the edge of the bed. Is it okay if I live with you? She asked. Not instead of him. Not for now. With me. Yes, I said immediately. Of course. Mark heard about it later. He didn't argue. I think by then, he understood that the parts of his life that mattered most had already decided. The final blow came quietly. His parents called. Not to yell, not to defend him. To say they were disappointed. To say they loved him, but didn't condone what he'd done. To say they needed space. When he hung up, he sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. I've lost everything, he said. I considered correcting him. But I didn't. Because loss implies something was taken. Nothing had been taken from him. He had placed everything on the altar of secrecy and walked away himself. The divorce finalized 6 weeks later. No dramatic courtroom scene. No public spectacle. Just signatures, facts, finality. I kept my calm throughout. I let him keep what he asked for. I took what I needed. And when it was over, I walked out of the building feeling lighter than I had in years. Not victorious. Free. The last time I saw Mark in the house was the day he moved out. He stood in the doorway, box in hand, looking around like he expected the walls to accuse him. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I know, I replied. That's what makes it worse. He nodded once. And then he left. I didn't watch from the window. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require witnesses. Healing doesn't arrive as a sudden sunrise. It comes in fragments. The first morning I woke up without checking my phone for messages that weren't coming. The first evening, Sarah and I ordered pizza and ate on the couch like we used to when she was little. The first time I walked into my house and felt peace instead of tension. Mark moved into a small apartment across town. I didn't ask how he was doing. I didn't need updates. Some stories end because they've reached their truth, not because they've found forgiveness. Sarah adjusted slowly. There were days she was quiet, days she was angry, days she pretended everything was fine. I answered every question she asked. I didn't protect her with lies, because lies are what destroyed us. Work became my anchor again. Machines made sense. Contracts held. When something broke, you could see it, name it, fix it, or replace it. People asked questions. Some whispered, some offered sympathy that felt more like curiosity. I learned to let it pass. Not everyone deserves access to your pain. 3 months after the divorce, I ran into Mark at a coffee shop downtown. Seattle was unusually bright that day, one of those rare afternoons when the sky reminds you why people stay despite the rain. He looked older, tired. Elena, he said quietly. Mark, how are you? I thought about it. Good, I said, and for the first time, it wasn't a lie. He nodded, eyes damp. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. No, I said gently, it doesn't. And that was it. No closure speech, no emotional reckoning. Just two people acknowledging the distance between who they were and who they could never be again. That evening, Sarah texted me, "Dinner tonight? My treat." I smiled. When we sat across from each other, laughing about nothing important, I realized something that took me a long time to understand. I didn't win because Mark lost. I won because I stopped shrinking. I stopped explaining, stopped accommodating betrayal, stopped believing endurance was the same as love. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do isn't to forgive. It's to walk away intact. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're lying awake at night wondering whether your intuition is lying to you, let me say this clearly. You're not imagining the shift. You're not too sensitive, and you are not obligated to stay where honesty has left. Leaving doesn't make you cruel. Staying silent about your own worth does. I didn't destroy my marriage. I survived the truth about it. And for the first time in a long time, I'm breathing freely.